today is all about negative space painting with watercolor. For this process, supplies. I recommend tube colors. I think that they work best for what we're going to be doing. We're going to limit our color palette to the red, blue, and yellow. So you would just pick out one red, blue, and yellow. It doesn't matter which red, blue, or yellow, and go from there. You will need a palette to put those colors on, and you will need good brushes. Student grade brush is just fine. I have a 1-inch, I have a 1/2 inch, I have some really nice brushes as well that I probably will be using. You're going to need to have water, obviously. You're going to need a shower board. I've cut it, this one is rather large. I didn't have this one cut down. When I was in the classroom, I had smaller shower boards and they worked perfectly. So, you're going to need watercolor paper. 100% rag is going to be your best bet for this process. The cheaper papers really don't work well at all. Because it's 100% rag, I don't have to block it ahead of time. I can just dive in, right? I have also drawn my image that I'm going to be working with. I'm going to be working with an abstract image and just shapes. So if you haven't already drawn out your image, I had a video that was about composition, and we did kind of a mock-up. I don't have this one glued down, but there you go. And I am basing my image off that mock-up. You will also need a natural sponge that we will use to get our paper wet initially, alright? So, we're going to begin. Let me make some room, and we'll get started. Alright, the very first thing I'm going to do is get this paper completely wet. And to do that, I'm going to get the sponge wet, and I'm going to basically mop that on. I'm going to mop it on the back side and the front side. Really, you want to start with the back first. I kind of did both here. And I'm squeezing the water out. I want this saturated. This is a wet on wet process for this negative space painting. And we're going to kind of do this in 2 sections. We'll have our wet paint and we'll get it really, really wet. And then, when we're done, we will take a dry brush approach, and add our details and work with the negative space part of it. So this part right here is kind of just setting it up and having a lot of fun. Now, if you have, like when you lay it back down, if you see bubbles, you want to lift that back up and make sure that you've got it wet. The fun part. We've got colors here. Okay, so I have my Alizarin Crimson, I have Cadmium Light, and I have Prussian Blue. And what I'm going to do is going to get one of those really, really wet and slather it over here on my mixing tray, like so. And then I'm just going to swatch through this, alright? Now here's the deal. If you know you've got a focal point area, we want to leave the brighter whites in there. You can overwork this really, really quickly, and we don't want to do that. So I'm just going to swipe, right? Oops, let's get some more color. And it just kind of melts and does some fun things in there. Yeah, we'll just swipe. Now I'm going to grab another color. I can also mix if I wanted to mix. Right now I'm just going to work with the primaries and just see what happens. And now I'm just kind of swiping, like so. And I'll go with the yellow. A little yellow in here. Notice I'm not worried about where my shapes are. That's not a concern right now at all. I am just swiping. And I'm just kind of playing. Now what I want to do is I want to flick some color on here. So I've got, and I had yellow on my brush, so I've got kind of a green, which is going to be pretty. And I take my hand like this, and I'm just going to tap it. Woo, this is my fun part. I love doing this. I'm just going to tap that right in there. I learned this from one of my really good friends, Lisa. who in turn learned it from another artist, who probably in turn learned this from another artist. And so it's had several spins and whatever. You can pick up whatever color. Again, I don't want to overwork, right? And now what I want to do is I want to consider working with the negative space. So I'm actually going to take the red, and I have a box in here, and I'm actually going to paint around that a little bit. And what will happen is that red will, when it dries, it starts melting into the edge. Alright? So I'm just kind of painting, kind of outlining that a little bit. See what happens. I can even come through with some of these other shapes that I have. Ooh, that made a nice kind of muddy color. Mud is okay in some cases. But if I put mud there, I want to put mud somewhere else. So I'm going to put a little bit of mud right here. Not really what I intended, but that's okay. I like the brighter colors. I think that'll work just fine. I'm going to put some intense blue, ooh, right in there. I really didn't want that much intense, but that's okay. And right in there. And it just bleeds out, right? Now, with watercolor, you know, it's all about the water. And so we really, really, really don't want any cakey areas. So check it out and make sure you don't have any cakey areas. I'm just going to leave that alone. That's beautiful. I hadn't intended that, but I love these happy accidents. They're just so exciting, right? And I'm just going to keep doing that. Just let that touch and let's bleed and see what happens. Yeah. One more thing. While it's drying, what you want to do, especially if you worked around the edges any, you want to take your sponge and lift this up and wipe. And the reason why is because see how this color got right here? That color, when this thing starts drying, will actually make a really strange, weird border around your painting that you don't want. So we're going to clean this up and make sure we don't have any extra color that went up underneath our paper. Yes, awesome. I have allowed this to dry. I've already kind of started without you guys. Apologies. I didn't have the video camera on, but I thought I did. Lovely on things about technology, right? So what I am doing is I'm working with the negative space. And I'm going to show you one portion here of how I've gotten where I've gotten so far and my thought process behind what's happening. So again, what I'm doing is I'm working with the negative space. I have a paper towel here that I can kind of dry my brush as I get it wet and I need to clean it. With watercolor, I have dirty water on one side of this container, and I doubt you can really see it, but I have dirty water on one side. So on this side right here, I have the dirty water, and on this side right here, I have clean water. And what that does in watercolor is I use the dirty water to clean my brush, and then when I want to go to another color, I'll get the clean water and come over here and grab the color so that I don't contaminate my painting with some dirty water that I just, that was not an intent I had, right? Okay, so I'm going to look at this area right here, this negative space, and I will show you a picture right now of what it looked like before I started just a little portion, so you can see that the lines are really lightly drawn. You can't see them on this video. You can kind of see as I start painting, anyway, I'm going to choose a purple right in here. I'm going to choose a purple for this area right here. That means I have mixed my red and my blue. I pulled the red and the blue together, and I've got a purple. And what I want to do is, it's kind of like you're outlining this shape. So I'm going to kind of outline that shape, and then I want to pull it out. Now if I leave that alone and let it dry, oh, not cool. What will happen is I'll end up with some lines I didn't want, like this line right there. So get my brush clean, get all that water off, get some clean water, and get all the water off, and very softly, I just kind of come in and soften that line out real quick. All right? And if I have to go around another shape to do it, that's fine. I just don't want there to be a line there. They have what's called, with watercolor, you have watercolor that will either stain the paper. Get some clean water there. So it will either stain the paper, and if it does, that means that it's really difficult to bring out any lights once you have painted with that particular color. And then they have other colors that just kind of lay on the surface, and they're real easy to lift off. You might test and see what colors you have. We'll test here just for grins and giggles. I've got this little red area here. Let me pull it up where you can see it. If I come over here and just scrub a little bit, see how that's kind of lifting off? I have a little line there if I wanted. Add that. It's still soaked into the paper some, so it's a little bit of a color that will soak in. I'm going to soften that back out a little bit. I may not want that. It is. Yeah, there we go. So let's test the blue. I found a blue that I don't like. Now what you're going to do with your painting is you're going to play. So I want you to concentrate on the negative space areas and pull those out first before you start working on positive space. Now, negative, positive. If I look at this large square area that I have here, I have some shapes inside that square area, right? So this right here is the negative space to this shape, but this is really the positive space to what's happening around it here. So it can get confusing. Just play, and see what happens. So now I'm going to work with some red on this big area. Don't hesitate to rotate your paper around as you're working so that it makes it comfortable for you. How are you going to get to those shapes, right? Now this one, and that yellow is still a little bit wet, so it's bleeding into it, but I kind of like that. Yeah, it's all good. I've got a big area here.